Hello, I am Wendy Valise, and I serve as the president of the Salem Chamber Board of Directors. I'd like to also take a moment to thank our partners at Key Bank for hosting today's program, and now we'll get things kicked off. I invite Ron Peters from Salem Aviation and Fueling to the podium to perform our national anthem. Please join me in standing for our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming? And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Ron. We sure appreciate your voice and your talent, Ron. Thank you. One of the favorite parts of the forum series is featuring the Spirit of Salem Award. And kicking it off this year is extra special. Just a little bit of background on the award. The Salem Chamber has the privilege and honor to bestow the Spirit of Salem Award to one or more of Salem's most impactful leaders. Spirit of Salem Award recipients exhibit servant leadership in every facet of their work. Recipients are individuals or organizations who work tirelessly behind the scenes day in and day out to make Salem a special and inclusive place for everyone. This month, we are honored to recognize an individual who has served as a mentor, coach, and sports official for over 50 years in Salem. John Witherspoon, a lifelong Salem resident and graduate of North Salem High School in 1968, is better known by the community as Cheeseburger. To better understand the nickname, you have to understand a bit about Salem's restaurant history, namely Bob's Burgers. John's nickname organically took hold as numerous high school freshmen watched in awe as John proudly consumed 25 cheeseburgers, 7 large fries, 2 large milkshakes, and 1 Coke in 1 hour time. Amazing. That's something to remember. Only kids could brand such a nickname to an adult, one which would thereafter become synonymous with the quirky and kind adult driving them to practice, coaching their teams, or reading to them when no parent or guardian was available. For over 40 years, Witherspoon has been a mentor at Four Corners Elementary, reading to children and bringing out an ear-to-ear smile from youth whose best time of the day is spent out of the home, not in it. Principal Hugo Valdez Jimenez, Four Corners is so lucky to have John Witherspoon, or Cheeseburger, as a volunteer. His dedication and passion for supporting the students and school community are outstanding. Students and staff value all the hard work that John invests into our school to help our students develop academic and social skills. Four Corners Elementary School is honored to have John Witherspoon as a volunteer, giving our students his heart and dedication for over 40 years as a volunteer. Our students and staff are thrilled to have him in our school, and we value everything he does to help our students thrive in education and life. John frequently could be found at athletic events associated with the Boys and Girls Club, where he coached basketball, baseball, and tackle football to the Greenhorns for nearly 50 years. John celebrated the youth and their successes. Throughout the 1990s, John brought 3 cheeseburgers, a large fry, and soda to all area football and baseball teams that qualified for this playoffs in Salem and Kaiser. Now that's some real motivation there. Remember, football teams had 60 players on their rosters. Baseball had 30, and so on. It's incredible. Every team got a special delivery from Cheeseburger, and teams counted on his old blue Jeep pulling up with boxes of food piled in the back seat. Curly Dairies would experience many orders for 600 ice cream bars, and here would come John to transport treats over to Boys and Girls Club for eager consumption. I almost feel he should get sponsorship from McDonald's. John would pick up kids from their house and transport them to practices and games because no one else would if he didn't. Sometimes he'd have kids piled on top of each other to make it work, and many times he'd have to make multiple trips. Getting kids onto the field or court allowed a safe release from the challenges of home life. John paid for league sports fees, purchased countless cleats for student athletes, and he worked on the cars of players and their parents if it meant getting them to school or practice the next day. John coached Babe Ruth and American Legion baseball while also serving as an OSAA baseball umpire and football official. Remembering back on conversations with then umpire Witherspoon, Tony Aiello shares, "My favorite moment of Cheese was the conversations with him between innings, or as I came up to the plate. A few different times with Cheese was umpiring. I politely told him that his calls weren't quite right. 'Cheese, that wasn't a strike,' to which he'd reply, You're probably right. I'll try to get it right next time. You know, they don't pay me as much. Just a hot dog and a drink." As a player, what can you say back to that? There are also powerful words spoken when reflecting on John's impact. Scott Harden shared, "I can't say enough about this guy. He was my first father figure. He made us feel loved, like we were important. He gave us the confidence we needed when we were lacking male leadership. He has such a special connection with children. He has no children of his own, yet he loves all of them. He teaches kids how to read. His life revolves around our kids and younger generations. He is a blessing in so many ways. I love him with all my heart. There will never be another John Witherspoon." Leaders like John Witherspoon are few and far between, yet John carved his own path forward to serving the young greenhorns who only sought a means to participate and play a role on a sports team. His body of work is certainly unique and meaningful and impactful, and he's a humble gentleman who was not altogether excited when he was made aware of this gathering. A quote from John states, "I want to give kids a chance to lead a better life and for them to become a productive member of society. Let's keep them out of cop cars and get them doing positive things." Some very sage wisdom there. This one's for us, John. We need to say thank you. Thank you, Cheeseburger, on behalf of the entire Salem community. We ask you to please come forward and accept this recognition.
What do you want me to say? She wants me to say something. How about goodbye? No, anyway. Well, thanks for the award. I mean, I'm just not into this kind of stuff. Like I said, I just assume you took all this money and took a bunch of greenhorns to Dairy Queen or something. You got something out of it, you know what I mean? But I guess all I can say is thank you. I just thought what I'm doing is what all you people want people to do, is get their butt involved and get out in the crowd and make a difference in the, you know, like Coach Haugen over there, he can probably tell you, like say, when you hire on as a coach or an official, you don't go out there to be anybody's friend. You go out there to be the coach and or the official. If they don't like what you're doing, throw their butt out of the game. Get rid of them. Pretty soon, word gets around, hey, you don't like what he's doing, but you better keep it to yourself because you'll be in the parking lot talking to yourself, you know. And, you know, I've thrown a lot of good ones out, and I've thrown bigger ones out, so I don't care. But anyway, like I said, I just try to do what I can do, and I'm sure not the police officers here in town know me by name and whatnot. You know, they've had a few visits with them. But, you know, like people that I find, like say, we get too much adultism in youth sports. I mean, I'm at a disadvantage nowadays because everybody's playing on fake grass. I can't draw the plays up in the dirt anymore. I gotta, you know what I mean? So you just gotta roll with the punches, do what you can. And remember, nobody came to watch you coach or officiate. They come to watch kids play, so put their little butts out there and let them get dirty and have a good time and go from there. So other than that, like I said, I could talk all day, but you'll probably get tired of listening to me. So thanks for the award. I think you should have found somebody better to give it to, but that's the way it goes. So anyway, I'll go back, eat a piece of chicken, and we'll go from there.
You did great. Now I'd like to do introduce our Key Bank, our Forum Speaker Series luncheon sponsor. For more than 160 years, Key Bank has been working to help clients, communities, and employees thrive by building enduring relationships as a company where people want to work, bank, and invest. Key Bank's customer base spans retail, small business, corporate, commercial, and investment clients. Today, Key Bank is based in Cleveland, Ohio, and is one of the nation's largest bank-based financial services companies with assets of approximately $187 billion. They maintain over 1,000 branches and over 40,000 ATMs located across 15 states. But the local presence in the Salem-Keizer area is felt deeply by our local business owners and operators. Although a national player, Key Bank has a distinctly local feel in their branches and with their skilled resident employees. As a presenting sponsor of the annual Safe Agribusiness Banquet, Key Bank fortifies its commitment to not only servicing personal banking needs of Salem residents, but also those businesses in agricultural and manufacturing environments. Please help me welcome today's forum sponsor to the podium. Key Bank is represented by Assistant Vice President Tommy Walker and Senior Vice President Ernesto Doskovic. Gentlemen, thank you for your generosity and leadership. Please join me at the stage.
Thank you. Well, it's hard to follow Cheeseburger over here. But we, first of all, we're really thankful to be here. Really proud always of sponsoring this event and really our partnership with the community here. That is something that we really thrive for here at Key Bank is to make sure that we are involved in the communities that we're part of and that we're serving our communities in that way. So we do that in many different ways through sponsorships, through grant giving, and we have a whole nonprofit side of us as well that just gets out and gets involved, and we make sure that we're always giving back and serving in these communities. And so, we're really proud of that here at Key. And then one of the things that we're really starting to see is just a lack of financial education, right? So most of us probably remember when we were in school, they taught us how to balance a checkbook. They taught us maybe a little bit about credit. They taught us about some stocks and those kinds of things. And we at least left with a little bit of financial education. And that stuff just really isn't happening today like it used to. And we're finding that we're seeing more and more people who really just don't understand how credit works. They don't understand how budgeting works. They don't understand what they need to do or how to get the loans or services that they need. And so, really one of the things that we're doing, and another way that we're giving back to our community is through education. And so we have a free benefit service that's available to any of you in the room and available to all of your employees, where we can come out and we can do free education seminars around just simple things about how do you actually budget? How do you save for the future? How does credit work? What if you've made some boo-boos and you've done some things and you want to turn your credit around? What's the best way to do that? And so those are things that we're able to do absolutely for free. You don't have to bank with us whatsoever. It's just a way that we're giving back to the community. And so we want to do that. We see a deep need to do that. And so we want to make sure that we're sharing, the knowledge that we have in our communities to really make our communities better. And the more that we find that people are educated within the finances, it helps all of us within a community to do better. We get better employees. We get better people that are able to invest in the community. And so we know that this is something that we can do in a way that we can really make sure that our communities are thriving. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernesto. He's going to tell you a little bit more about KeyBank.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Ernesto Tošković. Most of you know me. I work for commercial bank, and I personally work with businesses with revenue size from 25 million and up. We have Jack here. He works with agricultural businesses, but we also have business bankers who work with small businesses. What I'm really proud, though, of is, as Tommy said, our involvement in the community. For example, a few months ago, KeyBank donated $75,000 to YMCA Veterans Housing Project. We donated to some other projects smaller amounts of money, and we also match whenever our employees give, we match one-to-one their giving to the community. So I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud that when I walk the streets of Salem, few restaurants, few businesses have asked me for advice on their business plans, and I'm always happy to do that. So, bank allows me to do these volunteer projects where I can advise and help people achieve their dreams. Thank you for being here, and we are proud to be sponsor of Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
We're really lucky to have you. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to kick off the presentation, and I'd like to introduce our Salem Chamber CEO, Tom Hoffert, who will introduce the panel.
Our board of directors is brave. This is not a program you would have seen at some chambers of commerce. It's going to be highly opinionated, obviously going to be hopefully a little fun. But bravery is what our board of directors is about, and doing something a little bit different. We could have brought in any state analyst to tell you the numbers that you could read. We're going to give a little color to things, and I am so excited to introduce three experts in their craft. And please, if I could have all three of you come forward right now. As they are doing that, some of you may recognize this, and you may have likely seen this passed on from Jerry Frank. Jerry Frank would oftentimes hand people he was visiting with a globe, a glass globe, and ask them to carry it in your pocket to remember you have the world in the palm of your hand or in your pocket. But Jerry's passion was politics and getting people together, regardless of political association, for a stronger Oregon. And that is something this organization at the Salem Chamber, we proudly stand for. Because we do not look at the R or the D on the back of your name, or in one case, an independent, but rather what you bring to the table to make sure small business is going to be in good hands in the future, so all of us can proudly call Oregon home. Allow me to introduce our terrific panel today. Brian Clem is a fifth-generation Oregonian. He was born and raised in Coos Bay, and after serving as student body president, he graduated magna cum laude, from Oregon State University. They had a good weekend this weekend. After college, he worked for United States Senator Ron Wyden for several years before completing his tenure in 1999. Brian was in his second term as president of the Salem City Club when he was elected to the Oregon House of Representatives. Brian served the Legislative Assembly for the past 15 years before stepping down in December of 2021. After his time in legislature, Brian started a Moderate D's PAC, where he and a group of his former colleagues at the state capitol worked to support moderate Democrats in their election campaigns for Oregon legislature. Brian is currently a partner in North Point Development, who, along with the Port of Coos Bay, are building a new nearly $2 billion state-of-the-art eco-port for container ins and outs and create a new statewide facilitation network to allow our rail lines and commerce to thrive, not just out of north locations on our coastline. Clem repeatedly crossed the aisle to provide bipartisan leadership in the face of intense pressure from his own party, earning him the Salem Chamber endorsement on each of his campaigns during his time in office. Brian, great to have you on the panel. Next, we have Amanda Dalton. Amanda is the president of Dalton Advocacy, a female-led and managed advocacy and association management lobby firm representing the interests of employment, technology, agriculture, healthcare, and public safety. Amanda also serves as president and CEO of the Northwest Grocers Association. She comes to us today engaged in many of the employer issues important to our members today, especially before the new legislative session in February, such as labor, employment, and public safety. Over the past 10 years, Amanda has been one, if not the only, lead employment lobbyist at the negotiation table on all major new employment laws, including paid family leave and medical leave, paid sick leave, and scheduling laws, which is not to suggest we ought blame her, but rather know that she's been trying to make a difference, sometimes as a lone representative in those spaces. Dalton has served for the past 2 years as one of 4 employment representatives on the Paid Family and Medical Leave Rulemaking Advisory Committee, recognizing the mechanics and implementation will be one of the key duties of legislature coming in February. Welcome, Amanda. Finally, we have Reagan Knopp. Reagan has become one of Oregon's thought leaders within the right-leaning think groups. Knopp is an author, political consultant, and former political director for Oregon Right to Life. For nearly half a decade, Knopp was the editor-in-chief of the Oregon Catalyst, a conservative news outlet focused on casting a bright light on problematic issues in modern Oregon politics. As the owner of Knopp & Company, a conservative-focused political strategy and consulting firm, Reagan has managed numerous political campaigns ranging from Congress to city council to even localized school board elections. And they are coming in May, and you need to pay attention. Currently, Knopp is the host of the Oregon Bridge podcast and serves as chief of staff in the Oregon Senate Republican Office. Reagan is a resident of Albany and lives with his wife, Caitlin, 2 kids, Oliver and Maggie Jane. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our panel. Okay, some groundwork for today. First of all, nothing has been scripted at all. These individuals are all highly opinionated and highly skilled. And we're going to have a chance for you to ask a couple questions from the audience. If something piques your interest, please write it down and simply hold your hand up. Ron Peters, whose beautiful voice you saw, and Leon Christensen, who's giving a wave right now. We'll collect those cards, bring them over to Zachary Zalicki on our staff. Anything completely inappropriate will be probably thrown out. I do say probably. And we will try and see how much time we can have from questions from the audience. But we have a lot of business to get through. So ladies and gentlemen, let's start with a recap of Tuesday's general election. Again, these are opinions, but they are experts. That said, 3 individuals who navigate state and local politics each and every day have a good handle on the mechanics that we often don't see as residents behind the scene. Many of these races are not yet totally final. The Oregon process for allowing ballots to be mailed in on the final election day have created a bit of a lag that some of us have been a little uncomfortable with. Be nice to know the final results, wouldn't it? That has become now a 7 to 10, and even in some extreme cases, a month-long process. But we do have a good grip of the numbers, which you will see on screen. We will hear on the gubernatorial election, one which introduced a third-party candidate and certainly livened up the theatrics, I think we can all agree. We'll discuss our new congressional district and hear about 2 new Latinas going back to represent the state of Oregon in Washington, D.C. By the way, we have a first-time Latina serving as our president of the Salem Chamber in Wendy Valise, and I think this is very powerful. We continue to see incredible leaders coming up from across the diversity of our community. Panelists, let's start at the federal level. And to do that, we must start with one name, Schrader. Deposed by his own party with a perfect platform for somebody far more extreme, because we demand that. Brian, is this an indictment on the Democratic Party, or was Schrader already in the Republican crosshairs?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. When they talked about adding color, I think they meant that they've bet on how many times I drop the F-bomb. So I'm going to try and keep it, in the single digits if I can. I will say this: it was, to me, the results of the election are the middle striking back, and in particular, this is a good example. I think the voters punished Democrats for selecting the more radical candidate in their primary. Kurt Schrader was a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus that brokered the big bipartisan infrastructure deal, and he got fired by his own party. Now, in Southwest Washington, same thing happened. Jamie Herrera Butler, 10-year Republican veteran, she got fired. Both those more extreme candidates lost. That's the voters saying both parties are wrong. These were good public servants in both cases. Go look at Portland. Why did Joanne Hardesty lose? Too radical, too extreme. So in my view, a lot of the election results were the middle striking back and saying, no, we want to return to sanity in our lives and in our politics.
The only thing I would add, we were talking at the table before we got started about how all politics is local, and you guys as a chamber understand this better than most. I also think it was a little bit of, we don't really know Jamie beyond Jamie as the candidate. Whereas Lori Chavez-Dreamer really came to the table as a former local mayor. She'd been involved in Clackamas, so she kind of came with some street credit that I think maybe her opposition didn't have. So while I think that definitely it hurt coming out of the primary, I think the general voters were just faced with, let's look at a track record and somebody that's actually delivered for local communities before, and I just don't think we know who Jamie McLeod-Skinner was.
Reagan, we have a senior congressman ousted by his own party. Give us your take.
Schrader survived the 2010 Republican wave, and so there's a lot of Democrats on the progressive left who thought that he was the weaker candidate between him and Jamie McLeod-Skinner, and it's because McLeod-Skinner ran a strong campaign, still losing by over double digits, I believe, against Walden in 2020, which really endeared her to Democrats because that's a really tough race, taking on Greg Walden, right? And so I think that they really loved that she put up a fight, and certainly she did. It was a close election, but they think that she was the stronger candidate, and I just don't see a ton of evidence for that, especially in these results. So I don't know that Republicans, so back in the primary, we weren't certain if we were going to be running against Schrader or against McLeod-Skinner, and they certainly would have put up the fight against Schrader, but Scott Brune did in 2010, and he did his best, but he was still defeated by Schrader. So I think Brian and Amanda are essentially right on that point, that Schrader could have potentially been, and certainly this is true in a bunch of seats, but he could have been the majority maker if Republicans hold the U.S. House 218 to 217.
Let's stay on the federal scene. The red wave, hardly visible. Nationally, what is the landscape now with record inflation, surging gas prices? Seemed like the plate was full and ready for some major changes to occur. And yet we sit almost exactly the same.
I'll start by saying that I think that Republicans were sort of hoping that voters viewed Biden as a progressive president, and I think some of those late deals that he struck in Congress really kind of pushed back against that perception. We've been trying to cast him as a progressive, but whether he is or not, whether his administration certainly is pretty progressive, I don't think he's perceived by voters, or at least a large majority of voters, to be super progressive. And so I think that allowed Biden, the American people essentially gave Biden leeway to try to be that uniter. And so we're kind of going to see if he's going to be second-term Clinton or first-term Clinton at this point. And whichever fate he chooses, I think, is going to determine a lot about what happens in 2024.
Brian, any thoughts on national outlook with Senate and House?
Yeah, so first of all, I thrive on trying to have no spin. So I think, I supported President Biden in his election, but in reality, it's Donald Trump who dominates national politics still, for better or worse, and he got his ass handed to him, frankly. He lost multiple elections all over the country. People who denied elections, people who thought January 6th was just tourism got handed to them. And so I think that's the biggest outcome I would take. Now, having said all that, I mean, I'm a moderate centrist Democrat. So I think that both parties need to clean their own house and reject extremism in both their parties. That's why I put a lot of my own time and energy and some money into doing it in the Democratic Party, but people need to do it in the Republican Party too, or they will keep losing. The Democrats cynically put money into Republican Senate primaries to get the more crazy elected. And then they lost the generals, and now they're going to have the majority. That's a problem for the Republicans. And Democrats have their own crazy town, trust me. And so I think all of us need to act in our own parties, or like most Oregonians now, no party, to ask for reforms that make normal people run for office and get elected who aren't crazy. I didn't swear at all that time, I don't think.
You did actually once.
Did I?
You said ass.
I didn't say the F word, though.
You did not say F word.
All right, let's dig into one of those races. Very interesting, and we touched on the numbers, but I'd like to point out on this 5th congressional district, tell us how Lori moved into the driver's seat on this when at best we saw 3-4 times as many ads for Jamie McLeod-Skinner.
Well, so Tom, I do want to point out that it really depends on where you're watching the ads. So if you've got streaming, you're probably going to see more Dem ads than you're going to see Republicans. And if you've got cable, you're going to see more Republican ads. I would have to check this, but I believe that Chavez Dreamer, Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the super PAC that's allied with McCarthy, and then the NRCC spent a bunch more money for Lori Chavez Dreamer than they did for Jamie McLeod-Skinner. So I think McLeod-Skinner got outspent in this race. I don't know if it's by a ton. But the Working Families Party actually put out a press release basically blasting, and they had endorsed Jamie McLeod-Skinner, blasting the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, for triaging her race. They cut her loose. They moved the money to 6 to save Salinas, which did work, by the way, but the close margin they're basically saying is an indictment of Democratic leadership hanging her out to dry, and if she hadn't got badly outspent, she would have won. I don't know that that's the case, but Lori did outspend Jamie, and so that certainly does help in a competitive race. You want to be able to outspend your opponent if at all possible.
So looking, you did touch on District 6. Talk to us, Reagan, if you would, about what you feel happened in the Erickson-Salinas race.
My seat is getting warm, and I think that's probably because it's the hot seat now. So this is a tough one, I think. You've got an open seat, and I think that while you could look at the partisan lean of the district as being a pretty Biden-leaning district, it was drawn that way. It's a new district, and so I think, broadly speaking, you could say that voters were kind of open to basically both parties. They weren't pre-decided, even though it was drawn as a Democratic-leaning district, to pick a Democrat. They were being open-minded about the race, and that's why you see such a close margin. I mean, Erickson put a bunch of his own money into the race, right? Salinas raised a lot of money and then also had Democrats helping her at the national level, right? I don't think Erickson got the same kind of air support from D.C. that Lori did, but certainly it was competitive spending election, and so I think you can just kind of see that in the results.
The other piece on this one is to Brian's earlier point that primaries matter. I mean, think about what this race would have looked like with Ron Noble. I'm not saying anyone is crazy town in this primary, because I'm a lobbyist and I need every vote. But Ron Noble would have put up a very competitive fight in this swing seat, and I imagine those numbers could have been very different had he made it out of the primary instead of Mike Erickson, with the baggage, frankly, we knew going in was attached to Erickson.
And I mean, we're Salem. Add in if Kathleen Harder had won the primary and Ron Noble. I mean, Salem had 2 people to vote for, 2 choices, neither of which live in the district at all. Neither Erickson or Salinas live in the district that they just ran in. Yeah. And we're the largest population center in this whole district, and we have no candidate that we could look at and say, hey, I know Kathleen, I know Noble. Noble grew up in Salem. I served with Noble. Great guy. When I left, I passed the bipartisan baseball that I got from Newt Bueller to Ron Noble. So it would have been a totally different ballgame. Totally different ballgame. And that's that you need structural reform so these primaries don't put forth only the most extreme from both parties, in my view.
And Erickson put his own money to win the primary, too. I mean, he badly outspent Noble, which was a huge point in that primary.
Let's switch gears a little. And Amanda, I'd like to start with you. Oregon, for the first time, will send 2 Latino leaders to Washington, D.C. Talk about the impact not just for Latinas and women, but what should we as a community be aware of with this new voting bloc heading back east?
Yeah, I think you see it not only at the national level of the new kind of electorate, Oregon elected, but you also see it at the state level. I was with Daniel Wynn, who's going to be the newly elected state representative in the Lake Oswego area. Amazing moderate business Democrat candidate that's going to be incredibly powerful in the legislature. But he was being followed by a national documentary that was doing kind of how Oregon has the highest Asian Pacific Islander elected legislators in the country. So we literally sent more minorities to the legislature than any other legislature in the country. And I think that you see that in the national candidates that we chose to send over. For the first time, in the Oregon legislature, which I think is reflective all the way up, we've got minority caucuses that are forming, that are active, that are engaged. We've got a BIPOC caucus, we've got gay and lesbian caucus, we've got a new Asian Pacific Island caucus that I think will be strong. And frankly, I worked a year in California, and this is not new. It is in every other state legislature. Oregon was just very far behind. So I think the conversations throughout COVID, as it relates to women, as it relates to minority, are obviously reflected in the candidates we've chosen to send.
Anything Reagan or Brian would like to add?
I'll have an opportunity to talk more about candidate recruitment, diversity at the state level. I wasn't involved in national recruitment, but certainly Lori is a great example of how Republicans can do well when we recruit diverse candidates of all kinds. I mean, it doesn't just have to be based on gender or skin color either. There's all kinds of backgrounds that aren't traditionally Republican that we can draw from and find strong candidates to run in seats up and down the ballot. And I'm very proud of having worked in the Salem on some Salem Kaiser School Board races. Satya Chandagiri was one of my candidates that I worked for, and he has an amazing background in medicine, certainly, and certainly a very diverse background from his home country in India, and so he just really brings a great perspective. And so it's more of that I would really like to see from Republicans, and I think that goes to Brian's point about allowing us to clean our own house from extremists, because I do think that generally we got clobbered for extremism. In Oregon, at the legislative level, a lot of our candidates in competitive districts weren't extreme, but we do still have some general problems on that front in terms of messaging and in terms of national environment that's hurting us that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, you said you wanted provocative, right?
I want you to be yourself, Brian.
Okay. So let's talk about the Salem area. Republicans flipped 3 seats. Okay, Peter Courtney's seat, my old seat. Where's Kevin? There he is. Former representative who I went to for advice the first time I ran. He occupied my seat. Now he's got it again. Decade and a half later, slightly different with a whole lot of Kaiser and where we sit now. Actually, it's kind of an odd-shaped district.
It looks like a boot, which I thought
was
was my favorite district shape out of redistricting. It just looks like a little boot.
Yeah. But here's what's odd. Woodburn was intentionally drawn into having majority Latino representation. I was involved in that, 2001. All the Latino candidates lost in this area. Woodburn theoretically should have had a new Latino Senate, according to the plan that Democrats had. So I got drawn out of it on purpose, so I couldn't run for Peter Courtney's seat, which was ironic because I wasn't going to anyway. And instead, there was a thought among the sort of political Latino groups that we can get a whole bunch of people. Instead, they have 0 now. And that's the problem with not having enough diversity within your ranks of either party. So Daniel Wynn, Aaron Woods, black guy from Wilsonville, moderate Democrat, he won. People of color definitely can win, but not when you take them for granted, not where you ignore the fact, especially among Latino voters, that many are Catholic, many are very concerned about abortion. So spending all your time railing on abortion in Salem, and it's not a clear win. Go ask Rich Walsh. He'll tell you. It was very uncomfortable to be told that he had to send 4 mailers about how pro-choice he is. His own staff who are Latino wouldn't be in his commercials because they aren't. They're pro-life. And they were uncomfortable that their boss was being forced to talk about abortion all the time when he didn't want to. So go ask any Latino if they like being called Latinx. The polls show it's like 98% don't. They don't. And so the parties have to deal with the reality of people of color. It's easier for me to say it because I'm married to one. My daughter is one. So I'm a fat, bald, white guy, right? Got it. I know. Weird that I would talk about it, but we talk about it every day at home. Every single day we talk about race and diversity and how people pigeonhole people of color into one party or the other, or one view or the other, and they're just as diverse as the rest of us.
I'm going to switch gears. We have a lot of topics. Amanda, we had 4 ballot measures, starting out with number 1. The state will now ensure that affordable health care is accessible by everyone. And boy, was it close. I know it has not been officially called yet, but it does look like that will pass. Legislature's got some new work to do in February. Talk to us about this ballot measure.
Yeah, they do. I was looking at them again this morning just to see kind of where the numbers had landed. And I think almost every ballot measure will either have some kind of legislative statutory work attached to it, or even potentially end up in lawsuits, which is probably a unique position from where we've been historically. One, we also usually have 10 or 15 of these. So I think it speaks to a little bit of how difficult it was to qualify. And I say that as someone who pulled a measure in July that very much wanted to be on the November ballot. 111, and specifically, though, access to healthcare, I think part of this was just a confusion issue, right? I don't know that most of us, if you asked us today in this room, what does this measure actually mean for me? I can tell you, representing a handful of specialty providers and physicians, there is some concern that what this means to all of us is that as soon as the first test case walks into a hospital and can't pay for services and gets sent a bill, that will end up in a challenge to the courts. Under this ballot measure, it means access, and it means the state provides that access. And in my mind, that means the state pays for it. So as soon as that challenge gets kind of vetted through the courts, I think then we will finally know what this ballot measure means. There wasn't a fiscal statement, meaning no one estimated what this potentially costs the state, because we just frankly don't know, and sometimes those numbers are best left not discussed. But I think this is a challenging one for the state and what it means. And I also think, and I'm by no means the healthcare expert at this table, so you guys can weigh in, but for the most part, the majority of Oregonians today are covered by health insurance. We've done an incredible job getting private coverage or raising the threshold for the Oregon Health Plan to cover all, including children, including undocumented children. So it's very hard pressed to actually come in and not have coverage. Sufficient coverage, we can probably have that conversation. But I think this ballot measure will absolutely be tested at the courts.
Ballot measure 112 will remove language that slavery and involuntary servitude are able to be carried as punishment for crime. We won't sit on that one too much, but Reagan, this targeted squarely the Republicans. It amends our ballot measure 113, which passed handily, amends the Constitution that any legislator with 10 unexcused absences from the floor sessions will be disqualified from holding office at their next term.
So one of the things I think is interesting about this is generally, apart from a couple of already swing districts, Republicans didn't get punished for walking out, right? Those districts were competitive before we walked out. They were competitive after we walked out. And most of them we either barely won or barely lost, right? So I think generally this just says that Oregonians aren't really comfortable with walkouts, right? So that means a couple things. That means that we're going to have to see how this is implemented in terms of whether the presiding officers, meaning the Speaker and the Senate President, are the ones that get to decide if you get an excused absence, right? Because there are real excuses. You might have a doctor's appointment. You might have a family gathering or something that happens during session. So are they going to want to put that power in the presiding officers, or are they just going to want to write it in rules and say this is what you're allowed to be absent for, this is what you aren't? There's no opportunity to determine. It's black and white, and I think that'll determine really how much impact this has. This does present, and I will say it doesn't prevent walkouts if you've got a large number of any number of the parties who don't want to run for re-election, so they could still walk out. They're just banned from holding election. And I think also there's a chance that at some point this will get tested when a legislator walks out, is declared ineligible by the Secretary of State, and files a lawsuit. And so at that point you'd get to test this in the court and whether or not it holds up. And I'm not a legal expert, so I have no idea whether or not there's any opportunity for it to be overturned. I'm just saying that is a discussion that will have to work its way through the courts for us to know if this will actually be upheld. I don't know.
And I think that's one of those interesting places is when you say punishment, what's interesting is it actually says you can't run for re-election, which is if you think about it, a little bit of taking away the authority of the voters to send someone they've chosen back to the legislature. So I do think that poses an interesting legal question.
And I'll leave this one with Brian, but maybe you could tell me, running for a re-election sometimes is considered punishment among some members of the legislature. So, you know, it might do a lot of good. It might increase the amount of turnover in the legislature. We really don't know, but I'll leave that one with Brian. I have never served.
So can we go back one ballot measure just for a second?
Certainly.
So I'm cognizant of the fact that we're all white sitting here. I've got lots of black friends who wrote me and they said, dude, what in the world? Why would 45% of the people want to leave slavery in the Constitution? And it hurt their feelings. A lot of them aren't from Oregon. They're people who are like, I just read about this. My home county, 60-some% of the people voted no. Leave it in the Constitution. Here's what I'm praying. It wasn't the slavery part. It was the other part that made it look like we can no longer have prisoners work in order to pay for the cost of incarceration. And they got combined. But we just got to realize, to some people, it looked very bad, really, really bad. Even when I read it, I'm like, God, I don't know about this prisoner part. This seemed like a good idea. Why would we not do that?
Well, and amongst the Republicans that I was talking to, asking, because I got a bunch of people at church ask me about the ballot measure, because I'm the politics guy at church. What I told them was essentially like, I don't think that it's bad to remove the slavery from the Constitution, but the problem is like you were saying, you conflated a couple of issues. It's a constitutional change, which Oregonians already start skeptical of, right? Because they just don't know the implications, and they generally resist changing the Constitution. The other thing, too, is that I don't know if this was factual or not. It was just being passed around in Republican circles that one of the effects of this ballot measure might be that you have to pay minimum wage to prisoners, which was not something that we had a fiscal impact test on, right? Going back to that, there's no fiscal impact statements that really go with these. So I think that was one of the big kind of talking points that got circulated. Whether it's right or wrong, we don't really have a lot of data to test, but a lot of voters were making their decision on that point, not removing slavery. Everyone already is, the vast majority of people, including the vast majority of Republicans, do not think slavery is okay. It wanted it removed from the Constitution, but didn't like that it was combined with this, confusing ballot measure language.
We're pressed for time, but that's okay. Let's talk about this little election that was our gubernatorial campaign. We have not everybody at once.
So I'll say my number one takeaway, which no one is expecting. And by the way, I just want to make clear, everything I've said before, everything I'm going to say is my own personal view. It's not the view of Senate Republicans, any of my past employers. I just want to make that super clear when someone tries to use this against me tomorrow. So Drazen was an awesome candidate, one of the best candidates we could have hoped for. The fact that we picked up seats in the legislature, I credit a huge amount to her. Without a strong candidate at the top of the ticket, meaning Drazen. Now, certainly the U.S. Senate race was above, but we didn't have a strong Republican candidate there. Drazen fills in at the top of the ticket for a strong candidate that helped Republicans overperform, and I'll talk about that if we get to the legislature. We overperformed the Trump margins in every single legislative district and in many of the competitive districts by large margins, and that would not have been possible without Drazen at the top running an incredible campaign for Republicans. So I'm very sad that she is not going to be our next governor.
First of all, an ungodly amount of money was spent.
$60 million or something like that?
Way more than I thought. And, it was, I think it was
actually 72, I think.
Yeah, 70 or 80 million dollars. So first of all, anybody who asked me from last year till the night before the election, what's going to happen? I said, I have no idea. And the reason is I didn't know what to think of Betsy Johnson. I thought it might be $30 million from Betsy Johnson by the time it was done. And with how sick of people are of both parties, I thought there was a real shot that she could win. With that kind of money and that kind of message, I thought there was a real shot she could win up until, maybe 3 weeks out. So I think it was interesting for me to watch the business community because they got divided between Johnson and Drazen heavily. There were some very rough conversations, long-standing Oregon families, they got highways named after them, telling Drazen, get out, it's Betsy's turn. On the flip side, there were huge business players in Oregon telling Betsy, look, you can't win, get out. And so obviously nobody got out. That didn't happen. No one, as Christine said in her concession speech yesterday, very classy speech, congratulated Governor-elect Kotek, said let's work together. We should all work together for the good of the state. But she said none of us were ever going to have the majority of the vote. None of us were. We were all going to win at best with 40-some%, which leaves the majority feeling hurt, upset, angry, not sure what to do next. So I think the main point is Oregon typically has been a blue state for governor for a long time, and people had an expectation that was maybe this is such a massive red wave, it's going to change it. And with Betsy in there, who knows what happens? I still don't know the Betsy effect. I know that in her old district, which is the North Coast, she got 20% of the vote. My gut, because I'm from the coast, is that probably came out of Drazen, not Kotek. So most people, I think, thought maybe she would spoil towards Drazen. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But she got 160,000+ votes, and the difference between the other two is only 40 or 50. So she played a role, that's for sure. I just don't know what it is yet.
Amanda, I'm going to jump in on a question from the audience. Do you consider, in light of election results, Oregon more of an urban versus rural than it is Republican versus Democrat?
Yeah, that's interesting. One, that would have bought so many cheeseburgers. That's an interesting question. You know, I don't know that I would say I think we're still rural urban. I just don't think that we have seen that divide. I think we've all seen kind of the Oregon state map where it's red and blue, and I just think it was, I mean, sadly, I almost want to say it's Oregon v. Portland, right, at this point, which we've all kind of known, and this election definitely didn't help bring that group together. If anything, the divide is probably further today than it's ever been. So this legislature, this governor who is from Portland is going to have to absolutely address those issues. And I think she knows not only clean up at home, but also clean up at the state.
It's not often my own question gets bounced to the back of the line. This is too good from the audience. Candidates from both parties provided false statements throughout the entire election campaign and outright lies. With all the focus we spent on financial contributions, why is there no focus on requiring truth while you advertise for your campaign?
The First Amendment.
I mean, if you know I've checked, because when I got lied about, can I sue him? You can only sue your opponent or anybody else if you're a public official if you can prove they knew they were lying. So if they were lying but thought they had a bad source, that doesn't count. You have to, and I think Erickson actually did sue the Salinas campaign.
Yep.
And so it's people try. But to some extent, it's up to the voters to reject it. And if you make it really clear that you don't reward it, that's given the whole free speech issue and the First Amendment, that's probably the best way to deal with it. The other thing is we really should reform campaign donations. It's got to be fair, though. It can't just be, business gets hamstrung and labor gets to do whatever they want or vice versa. It's got to be fair, but we should lower the amount of lies that can be told by not having as much money spent and have it go to cheeseburgers.
And Brian, you're aware of it or have experienced your legislative record being interpreted differently than maybe a statement you gave on the floor, where you voted no, not because you opposed the measure, but because there was a bad amendment or whatever, right? And so all that stuff is just up for interpretation, and context is difficult in the middle of a campaign. And I think most of us have heard the expression, if you're explaining, you're losing. And so a lot of those things don't get explained in a campaign because there's no way to do it that really is going to allow you to win back voters. So you just focus on the issues that help you in polling. And so there's just a lot of it doesn't get responded to.
30 seconds from each of you. Closing comments. You've heard of the Princeton Gerrymander project, looking at different states and how effectively they redistrict. Every 10 years, we take a census. We gained a congressional seat, District 6 this year. However, they are done by party lines currently. Your thoughts on the People Not Politicians initiative designed to have independent redistricting occur?
I think it's a good idea, mostly because Republicans are unlikely to be in a position to ever draw the maps. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. I know that's a really cynical partisan take, but the truth is that you see in Arizona, they've got this commission, and it always comes out in the middle of the process that one of the so-called independents used to work for a Republican or a Democrat, right? And so you can never really have 100% truly independent redistricting. But the commission model is better because legislators aren't drawing their own seats, and they're not. And Andrea Salinas doesn't get to draw a seat that she runs for in Congress. Again, a cynical partisan take, but one that I believe to be very true. And so if you have people who aren't the politicians drawing the maps, you ultimately are more likely to get a better result that makes Oregon more competitive state. And that's all Republicans want. We don't want gerrymandered maps. We want maps that give us the ability in a regular election year to win the hearts and minds of voters in a majority of districts and win control of the legislature, and then we can be judged on the platform we put forward. But in the minority, it's difficult to put forward a platform because it doesn't get the opportunity to be heard in committee and on the floor. And so the People Not Politicians project, I think, results in more likely fairer maps that allow us to make our case in a better way.
So I know we're probably over the 30 seconds each, but my final floor speech when I retired was on the redistricting bill. I voted no, not because I thought the maps were that far out of whack, but because I thought the process was bad. And as I said in the floor, anybody who tells you they don't immediately look at where their house is in the district and try and influence is lying. I absolutely did, repeatedly looked at the lines and where my house was. And if I really thought I was running again, I probably would have tried to get them changed. That's why we should not be doing it anymore. I do support it. I think there's no matter what, there's a tendency for either party to want to write the rules to their favor, so don't let either of them write that. And I'm a Democrat. I mean, I spent, in my PAC that we talked about, I spent $300,000 this year all to Democrats. But what I really want is Oregonians to write the rules and Oregonians to pick their people. And I just hope Democrats get more sane, more business-friendly. I hope Republicans get out of the conspiracy theory business. And we need some structural reforms to make sure we can all live in some sort of unity, which is a big problem in the country. But we should show the Oregon way and teach everyone else how to do it.
I apologize, Tom, but this is my last point. In our targeted Republican Senate races, 12.5% was the average difference. So our Republican state legislative candidates ran 12.5 points ahead of Trump. Right, and so that's really hard to do, and we still can't win a majority doing that. We need somebody else leading the party in the future if Republicans are going to be competitive in Oregon. I don't know who it's going to be, which is the number one problem. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to beat Trump's margins in Oregon by enough to win enough votes to have split legislatures or even small control.
Fitting, Amanda, we end with you.
Wonderful. I'm going to take it home for you because I think this is where it matters. What does all of this mean for us as we go back into the 2023 legislative session? And so I think we hold Governor Kotek-elect accountable for who she appoints as director heads. They will make a difference. We have a new Bureau of Labor and Industries commissioner for the first time in a very long time that frankly very few of us have any kind of working relationship with her. That will be key, especially for most of you in business on the day-to-day pieces. That agency affects everything you do every single day. Oregon OSHA is about ready to have a new director appointed as well. We have new chairmanships coming in the House. We have new gavels being handed out in the Senate. We have a new Senate president. More change than, frankly, I've seen in my 22 years working in the Oregon legislature, and hopefully this is change for the better, because these numbers by no means gave anyone a mandate. They gave everyone a middle ground. So as long as everyone elected is reminded that this was not an affirmation vote of status quo, that this was a come to the middle, get things done, then we should be okay. We have been here before. We can be successful as a business community in that building. With majorities and with gavels that we know that we can work with. And so I hope to see you all in Salem in the legislature. You have great, strong leadership, and thank you for having us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel, but do not leave yet.
Thank you, and great job, our panelists, and great job, our moderator, Tom Hoffert. Thank you. And we're going to wrap this up real quick. I want to, again, thank our sponsor today, KeyBank. Thank you for being an amazing partner and sponsor and incredible community member. We also want to thank Allied Video Productions, Capital Community Media, and the Salem Convention Center. We could not make these events happen without you. Truly best in class here in Salem. Thank you to Ron Peters for performing our anthem today. And we want to shout out to all of our ambassadors today. They all came out, and it was beautiful to see all of you wearing your new jackets, and thank you so much for being here and volunteering your time to the chamber. You looked amazing. I want to give them a big applause because you guys were awesome today. John Witherspoon, AKA Cheeseburger, and I'm going to go have one after this forum, I think. You represent everything that is amazing and great in volunteering in this community. On behalf of the over 38,000 students you mentored, coached, or officiated, we salute you today. And thank you again, and congratulations on your award. We're super excited. We'll be here next month on Monday, December 12th. And we will host a holiday-themed forum titled The Impact of Salem Businesses on Local Youth Nonprofit Organizations. And isn't that a fitting way to start your holidays? So we hope to see you here, and we'll hear from 6 of Salem's strongest and ingrained nonprofit organizations whose focus is on improving lives for Salem's most vulnerable youth. Again, please join us next month. I also want to take a moment to recognize one of our long-time chamber employees who is moving to a new career with partners at Fisher, Hayes, Hoy, and Allen CPAs, and that's Christy Pippert. Where are you, Christy? You are in this room, and I don't know you. You are in the very back. So everybody knows she has served with the Salem Chamber for 5 years, managing our financials and our facility operations. This organization could not be as successful without people like Christy. And so again, Christy, thank you for all your service. We wish you well and know you'll do great things in your new role. And as Tom Hofford, CEO, states, Christy was an invaluable team member throughout her time at the Salem Chamber with an incredible personality and uplifted sense of humor. Christy helped guide our organization through a challenging financial period and chief executive transition. While we will miss her positivity, we are thrilled our teammate is keeping her skills here in Salem as a new member of the Fisher, Hayes, Joy, and Allen CPA team. I probably got that wrong, but I'm hurrying, sorry about that. So Christy, on behalf of the board of directors and the chamber staff, thank you again, thank you for your service. And Naomi, would you please present Christy with the wonderful flower arrangement, if you could. There we go, thank you. So thank you so much, Christy. As Christy transitions into her new career, we are equally excited to introduce a new team member, and that is Jackie Ellerbrock. You will get to know Jackie over the next few months. We welcome you to the team. And now we have our 4 giveaways today. Audience members are selected randomly from our registration list, and the first 3 names may come forward and take home a Salem Chamber gift bag with wine and logo wear. And those names are bag number 1, Monique Despin. Bag number 2, Claire Latuller. I probably got that wrong. I'm sorry, Claire. Okay, great. Thank you. Number 3, Mike White. I know you. Yay, Mike. And then number 4, which is the Ross flowers, that will go to Alex Ferry. Yay! Great. So thank you all again. Have a terrific afternoon, and we'll see you in December. Thank you.